Tonight's series is a new series, never done it before. It's always nice to learn new things. It's called the 6 Constant Mitzvos, and we'll try today to get a better understanding of what it means to have a mitzvah that is constant. And we'll start with the first mitzvah because we have 6 weeks to these series. We were supposed to have 7 weeks, and then they cut out last week, and I was like, yes, because there's only 6 constant mitzvahs, so which is much easier for me. So we'll start with this idea of constant mitzvah, move to mitzvah number 1, and by the end, we'll have all these mitzvos, and we'll be able to understand what really is behind, what a mitzvah is, and what it means to have it constantly. So first of all, I want to ask you all a question. And it is rhetorical, so don't feel the need to answer. But how many times a day do you think about the laws of gravity? You can say never. It's okay. It's possible that days and years and decades will go by and you will never even think about the force of nature that we have. You'll never think about gravity at all. But at the same time, you have to understand that our awareness of this existence of gravity in this world, of the whole gravital pull, and like we don't have to be like Isaac Newton, but we do understand. He's the one who discovered gravity, right? Okay, just making sure I didn't mix him up with like Confucius or something. Okay, so we have this gravitational pull in this world, and we are aware of it, but we don't necessarily think about it every second of our lives. I drink my coffee, I pick it up, I take a sip, I don't think twice before putting it down. I don't think that my coffee is going to start floating into space, right? Like it would if you were an astronaut. Even the simplest movements that we make every single day require gravity. We would not be able to walk. We wouldn't be able to lie down. I do think it would be cool, though, to try it one time. But we wouldn't like to go in a spaceship and you're floating around, right? You wouldn't be able to lie down. You wouldn't be able to shake hands with anybody. You wouldn't be able to do the things that you do every single day. But now that you think about it, and you start to realize what an influence it makes on our life. So it's like that question, you know, when people ask you like, oh, do you even notice when you blink? And you don't, but then once you have it in your head, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm blinking, right? So now you're going to be thinking every step you make, you're like, gravity is holding me down, right? So although we're not constantly aware of this force of gravity, we don't necessarily think about it on a conscious level, but it is somewhere in our subconscious level, somewhere that we can't necessarily reach, but it's there. That information is there. Now that information that we have that's stored in our subconscious is called something. It's called, you should know by now, awareness. We're aware of certain things. We don't necessarily think about it all day, but we are aware of it. I didn't mean to put you on the spot because you told me. Okay, so this is awareness. Now, every decision that we make reflects our awareness, even though we don't think about it. We are just aware of it. So let me try to give you some examples of some things that we are aware of, but we don't necessarily need to think about. Of the 613 mitzvos, we need to be doing these 613 mitzvos. There are 6 mitzvos that are deemed to be constant. The Torah tells us, this actually comes from a Sefer HaChinuch, which is a book on chinuch, which means, chinuch means to study, to learn, to teach. This book tells us that there are, of the 613 mitzvos, 6 of them are constant. We need to be aware of them at all times. How am I aware of something? Are you aware of day and night? How? How are you aware of day and night? The light by experience, right? We know that a certain time of day comes, switch over to night. At that point, I fall asleep, I get tired. We are aware that people act differently during day and night, right? Parents act differently. I start to put on my strict mommy face when it gets the night because now it's time to go to bed. But the problem is now that it stays light outside till like it's 9 o'clock, they're like, Mommy, it's day, it's not the night. I'm like, no, it's night. Your internal clock should know. People act differently during day and night. That's an awareness that you get used to that grows within you from when you're a child. Take driving, for example. I get pulled over all the time for putting my makeup on when I'm driving. It's a big problem. But when I originally started driving, right, I'm the youngest in my class, my birthday's in October, everybody in 12th grade is driving, everybody's all, you know, taking driver's ed. I come to driver's ed, I put like 6 phone books on the seat, I sit down, I start to drive, and they're like, okay, put your car in park. I'm like, what's park? I'm like, where's park? Like, right, do I have the gear shift over here? Do I have it over here? I did not let anybody put music on when I'm driving. I'm like, I have to signal. Wait a second. I'm like, I'm like, okay, turn left. I'm like, how am I ever going to do this? I passed my road test on my first try. I think the guy liked me. I was just like very sweet and friendly. Passed my road test, comes the next day, I start to drive. I will tell you how I drive, but I don't want anyone to report me. On my way to work, I'm like eating my breakfast, I'm talking on the phone, I'm putting my makeup on, I'm driving, I'm drinking my coffee, I'm preparing my stuff, doing everything, and I'm like, when did that happen? When did it go from me sitting by the car, holding the steering wheel, right? Like, where do I put, how do I take my right hand off the steering wheel to put the blinker on, right, to turn, right? And then all of a sudden to me driving smoothly on the highway, on the phone, drinking my coffee. When did that awareness of me being able to drive happen? So now you can understand that there are some things that we do that we don't necessarily think about, but they slowly slip into our subconscious, and then we just live our life like that. These 6 mitzvos that we will learn starting tonight are concepts, are mitzvos, that we need to constantly be aware of. One of them will be turning your blinker on to make a left turn. One of them will be switching your gear into park or to drive or to reverse, right? You're like, am I on reverse? Am I on forward, right? You don't know, but all of a sudden, these mitzvos fall into your subconscious and you're able to live life with them and you never thought you'd be able to. How do I know that they slipped into my subconscious and I do it? When did that happen? When it happened, how do I know? Because every decision I make in driving is possible because I have these awarenesses of driving. Take the mitzvos. Now that I have these mitzvos slipped in my subconscious, I have them part of me, every decision I make will be affected by these awarenesses that I now have learned. So whether they be, these mitzvos are, to know God, to love God, to fear God, to have a relationship with Him, to know that He is one, all these mitzvos will become a part of me so that my everyday life will now be changed. Every decision I make will be based on those awarenesses. Any questions so far? No? We're good? Okay. So now I just want to explain to you a little bit about the ways that we are able to learn, because we've done a lot of learning so far. Okay, there are several ways for us to be able to study Torah. I know some of you may have taken Reb Zalman's class before and you learned this idea of Musar. Yeah, how many of you were in Zalman's class? Just so I know that I can test you all if you're listening. Okay, good. So there's this concept of Musar. Okay, them is called Hashkafa. Well, we will learn information, spirituality, we'll learn about God, we'll know things. And then the second one is called Musar, where we take something that we've learned and we internalize it. We literally make it part of our bones. We bring it inside of us. So we can learn something, right? We can read a book. We can learn about God. We can come to classes at the JEC, right? We have all this information. That's beautiful. Yes, there is a God. How do I know? I read about Him in chapter 11, right? I know that there is a God. Oh, I took Rabbi Lawrence's class on God. I know there's a God, right? I know there's Hashem. Yes, there's mitzvahs, there's Shabbos, right? So beautiful. At what point do we take that information, that outside information, and bring it inside of us? Now, for those of you who took Reb Zalman, you understand that there was a movement of where people decided that they weren't internalizing information and they needed to sit and work on themselves to make that information part of them. Take the outside information and bring it within. Now, the difference between hashkafa, learning something, reading about it, hearing a class, right? Like I started downloading classes to my phone so that I can listen on the car, on the way to work, right? It's so nice to hear something. Then musar, which means to internalize it, means that now it is a part of me. So I'm leading you on to the 6 constant mitzvahs where I want to take something that's out there and bring it within me and make decisions, right? So we're thinking musar already. So I'll give you an example of what this means to take information inside of you. In the beginning of Exodus, right, the beginning of the story of, the beginning of Shemos, right, the first Exodus, the first of the second book of the Torah, it tells us the story of the Jews going into slavery. So how did the Jews go into slavery? Really, we weren't always slaves. What was the story? What was the beginning story? Joseph was down there with his brothers. They had all this food. They had all this money. They helped build up the economy in Egypt, right? Remember, Joseph and the technical multicolored coat, whatever, yes, which I learned a lot about, and someone bought me the DVD because I always talk about it, so I watch it, it's great. So what was Joseph? Joseph was the one who built up the economy. Comes Exodus, and it says, a new Pharaoh came to the throne. A new Pharaoh, what does the commentary say? What does Rashi say? It says, this new Pharaoh did not know Joseph. He did not know Joseph, and he enslaved the Jews. Okay, so you can tell me, what, he didn't know Joseph? Everybody in Egypt knew Joseph. I mean, come on. He's the one who put all the food in the storehouses that you were able to have food now. He's the one who built up the economy. He's the one who figured out how the Nile works, that it overflows and you can benefit from it. Don't tell me he didn't know Joseph. How could he not have known Joseph? So what is the answer? It says he didn't know him. So either he like pretended he didn't know him, you know, he's like, oh, Joseph, oh, that one. Now, the commentators ask, like, what is God, like, God is writing this Torah, right? Hashem is writing the Torah, and he's saying, oh, he didn't know Joseph. It was like this, it was like a literary term. Like, oh, he didn't know him. No. If the Torah says he didn't know him, that means he did not know him. How did he not know him? He didn't internalize the information and realize what goodness Joseph had done, that it was like he did not know him. So that means you can have information, you can go to classes, you can hear things, you can know things, you can learn driver's ed, and then you can get in the car and be like, oh my God, like, what am I doing here? I don't know what I'm doing here. You don't know how to drive. Now, I'm going to tell you something. It's a little scary to hear this, but I think it's at this point in the JECU semester, right? If you started in the beginning of the year, you're at the point where you heard of this information, and now you're going to say, how do I internalize all this information that I've been learning? If you can say that you've been learning, oh, you know, like before you learned how to cross the street, like it's very scary. Like as a kid, like, listen, I'm a mom, like I don't let my kids ever go in the street, and they're not going to cross the street till they're like 12. But when I did remember learning how to cross the street, it was like, look both ways, right? Like check if there's a stop sign, check if there's any like bike riders in the street, and then you slowly start to cross the street. So you know all this information. Now, what right person in their mind would be crossing the street, learning how to cross the street, a 12-year-old, right? That's appropriate age to start crossing the street. 12-year-old starts crossing the street, sees a car coming by, and be like, I know the information. I know that I should run, but I'm not ready for it today. Nah, today, you know what? Like, maybe I'll start tomorrow. What person in their right mind would take that information and not internalize it? Now, you have all this information, okay? I hope I'm not coming on too harsh. You have all this information. You're going to say, not today. I know God exists, but, like, I'm not ready to take on the information. That is Musar. That is being able to take something and internalize it. You're standing in the street and you're saying, okay, steps are crossing the street. Look both ways. I forgot to look both ways. Oh, yes, there's a car coming. Run. Not today. It's okay. I'll do it another day. You have this information. You need to make it part of you. So now you have these mitzvos, these 6 mitzvos, which we're going to be learning starting tonight. You have this information. Now I need to internalize it so that every action that I do will reflect that awareness. So if I know that God is one, if I know that there is a God, which is the first mitzvah which we'll do, how do I act accordingly? Do I just say, oh, okay, tomorrow I'll learn about God? No, you have this information. Your actions need to reflect that information, that awareness that you now have. Any questions? No? We're good? Okay. So now let's start with our first mitzvah. Okay, so I should have printed out this thing about the first one, but okay. So the six mitzvahs that we are responsible for are, the first one, we're going to start with the first one. Do you want me to go through all of them, or should we just just start with the first? Go through all? Yeah? Okay. So the first one is to know that there is a God. Leida sheyesh Eloka. To know that there is a God. So we're going to understand what that means to know there's a God. Then there is to know that there's no other God, no other idols. Then there is to love God, to fear God, to not stray after your eyes and your heart. I mean, they're not actually in order. And the last one is to know that God is one, like Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. Okay, so those are the 6 ones. So I was trying to read up on this, and I'm like, I don't remember my own phone number. I have the worst working memory possible. Like, somebody gives me a phone number, I have to like put it into a song in order to remember it. Like, when I was a kid, if you had it in a song, I can remember it. Like, I know all the what? Oh, I know all the state capitals in the song. I know the presidents in the song. I know the what the months in a song. If you put in a song, I know it, okay? So then I'm thinking, like, how am I going to know all this? And then some Jewish music writer put these into a song. So now I'm able to remember it. But as long as it's in a song, I can get it. So how are we going to remember this? We're going to make it part of our subconscious so that we can remember it, okay? We're not just going to list them, because listing them would be the first way of learning Torah by going to a class. We're not just going to list them, we're going to internalize them. So number one is to know that there is a God. Leida sheyesh Elokah. That's in Hebrew, to know that there is God. Living with God is not just having an idea that that he's alive, right? That we believe that he exists, because that would just be going to a class, right? Hashkafa, just learning information, beautiful information. It's actually to have a relationship with God. Not just knowing him, but having a relationship. Question number one, how can I have a relationship with somebody I do not know? I know all of you because I meet you on trips or I meet you at the JEC, but how am I supposed to have a relationship with somebody I never saw or I never met, right? Good question. So now there are two building blocks to creating a relationship. I mean, there's many building blocks. It's very difficult to build relationships. But how do I build a relationship? First, I need to meet you. I need to see you. I need to sit down with you and say, hey, how are you? What's your name? What's your phone number? I'll memorize it, put it in a song, right? And then I want to know exactly, like, what your deal is, who you are. I can start to learn who you are. And the second way of building a relationship is free choice. I need to agree to be with you. I need to agree to meet with you, to hang out with you, to go on a date with you, to go to a bar with you and scream in your ear because there's so much noise going on, right? I need to be able to know you. But we have a very big problem here. How am I to have a relationship with God if I never met him? Duh, right? Okay, good question, right? But how do I know where God is? And then I'm like, no, God's here. He's in the sky. There's a song, Hashem is everywhere, right? Okay, do you know anybody know that song? Hashem is here, Hashem is there, Hashem is truly everywhere. And then my kids start being like, how is Hashem everywhere? And I'm like, don't ask me. Like, I can't answer that question. Hashem is here? Is Hashem here? Is Hashem in my stomach? Is Hashem in my head? Is Hashem, you know that all these questions, right? Where is Hashem? So we do know that God is in the sky, right? But in order for me to develop a relationship, I need to get to know him. Now, should God ever show up at my house, knock on my door, and say, hello, hi, I'm God, I created this world, I would be so taken aback that I would be like, wow, I have no choice but to believe in you. You're real. You're right here. Oh my God. Where are the 613 mitzvos? Let me do them right now. I have no other choice. You're standing right here. I am so overwhelmed by your presence. I would say I would kneel, but we don't kneel in Judaism. I would have to pray to you all day. You're here. You're real. Give me a hug. Now, the question, though, with that is, if he is to reveal himself, and then I know he exists, filling one prerequisite totally kills the other. What's that point? What do? God is walking the fine line of trying to get to know him, of proven existence, but then again, free choice. If I know that he's here and I see him actually, I have no other choice than to believe in him. So we have a problem here. So if we look back to the beginning, the first time that we ever experienced God's reality, when was that? Mass revelation. Sinai, right? So let's go back to the first time that God actually showed who he was to the world. Okay, that was the first time, okay? So the Jews were slaves in Egypt, we have 10 plagues, all this stuff going on. And then Moshe is instructed by God to ask Pharaoh, let my people go, right? We're going back to the story of Pesach. Let my people go. Moshe has to ask Pharaoh to let his people go? Hello, God's in the picture. Snap your finger, we'll be out of here, we'll be in Israel in no time. Like, why did he have to ask Pharaoh in order to let us go? Free choice, exactly. Had he not asked Pharaoh's permission, then we would have realized, oh, obviously God is the one who's ruling us. So what was the whole story of Exodus, the whole show, the 10 plagues happening, us leaving Egypt? What was that? It was in order for us to understand that, yes, there's a God in this world, okay? We saw God split the sea and everything happened. But it wasn't just to anybody. It was the land of Egypt. And what do we know about Egypt? That nobody ever left Egypt. Egypt, actually, the Hebrew name for Egypt is Mitzrayim, which means matzar, which means constraint. It was like locked in. You're not able to get out. So it was this epicenter of civilization where everybody lived, everybody was stuck here, and it wasn't just to let the Jews to go out. It wasn't just a big story. It wasn't a big show so that we can make a movie out of Exodus, of us leaving out, right? 10 Commandments, which I hate that movie, right? And then what was it? It was a platform for God to reveal himself 6 weeks later at Mount Sinai. So we have this whole show, okay, going on in Egypt. Everything's happening, big story, big news, breaking news, split the sea. And then we can come now to Mount Sinai to receive the Torah. At that moment, God was no longer theoretical. It wasn't just an idea that, oh, maybe there's a God. Oh, does he exist? No, he was real. That was God showing up at my doorstep. Hi, I'm here. Brought you dinner, Chinese, your favorite. I am right here. That was God saying, I am here. And that is the source, by the way, for this mitzvah, to know that there is a God. The source is Anochi Hashem Elokecha, the first of the 10 Commandments. He said, I am Hashem. I am your God who took you out of Egypt. And in short, he was really saying, I'm real. I am here. Know who I am. So now the question is really, though, was this information new to us? At Sinai, was that information new to us? Remember what just happened 6 weeks ago? What happened? 10 plagues, there was blood, there was frogs, there was wild animals, the firstborn died. All this was happening. They split the sea. The Jews are crossing the sea, and it actually says when they crossed the sea, they looked up at the heaven and they said, Zak Kili Van Veu, this has to be the hand of God. So why are we saying at Sinai, I am your God. Anochi Hashem Elokecha. I am your God. What was the difference between what happened in Egypt and what happened at Sinai that proved God's reality? So let me tell you something that happened in Egypt. In Egypt, the story of Egypt was like a multiple choice test, okay? You love those multiple choice tests, right? When I took my Kaplan test for the GREs, they told us, you don't need to know the answer. You just need to know which answers are wrong, and then you can figure out the right answer, right? Love those Kaplan tests. They're like the biggest money makers. What do they tell you? You don't need to know the right answer. It's multiple choice. Just figure out which one is not the right answer, and then you have your right choice. Egypt was just that. Why? We're sitting there in Egypt. We have witchcraftery, right? We have, like, people are able to do magic. We know that, right? The Egyptians were able to do magic. They were able to shapeshift and do things with their sticks and everything. And they're like, oh, big deal. Like, you could turn your stick into a snake. Well, I could also turn my stick into a snake. And you can make it blood. Oh, I can also do that. I can do that. They had real magic. But as the story of Egypt continued, as the Exodus continued, one by one, we were nixing things. We're like, couldn't be magic. No. Oh, you sure splitting the sea wasn't like an earthquake that turned into a tsunami that split the water? No, it couldn't be. It couldn't be. Cross that one off. Okay, so I have 2 more answers. Oh, don't you love when they go none of the above or all of the above, right? They like throw in those and they're like, oh my God, this is killing me, right? So it's like, we know it's not magic. We know it's not nature. It can't be a natural disaster. It can't be that. It must be the God of the Jewish people. So it was seeing God in his form, but by negating everything. What was Sinai? Seeing God in the positive form. You know, when they're like, write an essay to explain your answer. And you're like, come on, don't ask me to explain it. No, that was what Sinai was, seeing God in the positive form. Egypt was negating all other options. No, this can't be God, this can't be God, this be God. What is the mitzvah number 1 that is constant? To know God in his positive form so that you can say directly to the first question, was there a God? Is there a God? Yes. Now we can come to that mitzvah. How do we actively do that mitzvah? That mitzvah, by the way, has another name, to know that there's a God. And what is that mitzvah? I'm going to ask Liz because I know this answer. What's your favorite word? Belief. That is the mitzvah of belief, believing in God. Knowing that there is a God means emunah in Hebrew, believing that there is a God. What does it mean to believe that there's a God? Not by saying, oh, there's a thunderstorm outside. Oh, maybe it's hail and fire and ice falling from the skies, or maybe it's God. Not negating all the other options, but seeing God in his full positive sense, by seeing something perhaps that could be bad and not necessarily understanding it and saying, I know that that is God. Because when God revealed himself at Sinai, yes, it was new information. It was me getting to know him as a relationship. The first step in building a relationship, to know who you're having a relationship with, was what happened at Sinai when he said, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, I am the God who took you out of Egypt. Now, how do we come to know God? By the way, if you notice the wording, it's very interesting, to know that there is a God. What does it mean, know, to know that there's a God? Why don't you just believe in God? What does it mean, know? What is leidah in Hebrew? Leidah comes the Hebrew word of da'as, which means knowledge, okay? Knowing. Now, what does the Torah say about knowing? This is interesting. The Torah says that knowing means acting upon. Now, this goes back to how we started in the beginning when I said when you have a piece of information and you learn it and you don't internalize it, it's worthless. You'll get run over by that car like a deer on the road. What does knowing that there is a God mean and making it part of your awareness that will slowly slip into your subconscious? When you know something, if you don't act upon it, it's worthless information. Now that I know that there's a God, and I'm just going to say, I'll say a little white lie. Nothing's going to happen to me. I know that there's a God, and he told me not to lie, but it's okay. He'll cover me on this one. No. Knowing means acting upon it. And the more you act upon it, the more you know. And the more you know, the more you act upon it. It's a cycle. Now, if I have this information, yes, I know that there's a God, and I don't act in that way of knowing that there's a God, that means leading my whole life by knowing that there's this guy standing on top of me, it is worthless information. It's like Snapple Cap information, which I read all the time. And what was my Snapple Cap today? See, I don't even know it because I didn't act upon it. But Snapple facts, by the way, I heard that they're not all true. Oh, really? Oh, so I never know if they're true. But like, Snapple facts are like, what?
That's why it says real in quotation marks.
Oh, that's why it says so real facts. So like, I open up my Snapple every single morning. I look at it and I'm like, oh, that's cool information. Don't act upon it. I clearly don't remember it. I don't even remember. I'll look it up so I know for next week. But that's worthless information. Who cares if pigeons have four legs? I mean, they only have two, but let's say like some. Who cares about that information? I don't change the way I act every single day accordingly because I have that information. No. If I don't internalize an information of knowledge of God, it is worthless. So what is this mitzvah of knowing that there's a God, of building a relationship with God? It's first figuring out who he is. But we have that constant battle of figuring out who he is because he masks himself from us. How does he mask himself? And what does he mask? He has the best camouflage, by the way. How does he mask himself? Oh, speaking of camouflage in the Hunger Games, right, where he, Peter, like, camouflages himself. It's awesome, right? That's the best part of it, because he worked in a cake bakery. That's how he knew how to do it, right? Sorry for all those who have not read the Hunger Games. It's time you jump on the bandwagon and read the Hunger Games. So what is God's camouflage? Think what happened in Egypt. What could have his camouflage been? Nature. Oh, it was a tsunami. Oh, it was a hurricane. That's why hail came flying down. Oh, the locust came because there was some weird wind, right? Negating all the other options. And we can live our life like that. Believe me, we can. We also shouldn't go the other way and think that everything is a sign from God. But if you can live your life by explaining everything, oh, it was nature, oh, it was a natural disaster. Whenever I watch those YouTube clips of the tsunami that happened in Japan, where I see the water just like covering the streets like so fast, and I'm like, how could there not be a God in this world? And everyone's going to be like, oh, it was this excuse. Oh, it was that excuse. Yes, God has a great camouflage. And the reason he has that is because then we would never have free will. We would not have the choice to know him. We would just be forced. It would be like, plunk, 613 commandments, do them. You have no choice. Now I have this constant battle of teetering between free will and knowing God. But once I get to know him, what do I need to do? I need to live my life like that. So mitzvah number 1 that we did tonight is not just knowing it and listening to a class, is living your life by knowing that there's a God. And how do I live my life by knowing that there's a God? Let my actions show that. Slowly start to realize, you know what, like if I cheat on this test, like really nothing is going to happen because like nobody's going to know because my teacher doesn't even see that. But if I do cheat on this test, will that help me later on in life? Does knowing that there's a God make me more scared to cheat on a test? You bet. When I hear the principal walking down the hallway, do I get more scared? Yes. That's how it should be with God. Well, that's for the mitzvah of fearing God. But this knowledge of knowing that that there is a God in this world will affect all my daily actions. So now I think really mitzvah number 1 will include all the other mitzvahs because you need to first know that there's a God in order to love him and to fear him and to believe in him and know that he's one. So mitzvah number 1, Leidah sheyesh Elokah. And how do we know that there's a God? Because Anochi Hashem Elokecha asher hotzisicha me'eretz Mitzrayim. God revealed himself at Sinai. He showed him to me. He showed himself to us and made himself a reality by presenting himself, making a big light show, right? Light and thunder and brought down the Torah. We saw him in the positive sense, and now all my actions are affected by that. Any questions? No? We're good?